Lee Povey is a high performance leadership coach. He is helping founders, startups, and teams cultivate an Olympic mindset. Welcome to the show, Lee.
Hey George, how are you?
I am doing great, sir. Appreciate you coming on. Tell us about your personal life, some more about your work, and why you do what you do.
Yeah, let's do this as quickly as we can. So, son of a sociopathic narcissist. So, as a little boy, I understood I didn't want to be like him, but didn't really know what I did want to be like. And that kind of gave me a fascination with human beings, how the world worked. My brain already works like that. As I've discovered later in life, I'm both dyslexic and autistic. School was a bit of a challenge for me because of those things and not knowing them at the time, especially the autism. We didn't even really know that existed back then. I'm 52 years old. So I kind of had to figure things out and study. And, part of the autism is we typically aren't as aware of our behaviors as other people. So that made me very observational. And in fact, can remember sitting in a swimming pool as a lifeguard and watching other lifeguards do things and thinking, oh, that's how I meant to do it. It wasn't as natural for me. So that's made me into a lifelong observer. In my early 20s, I started therapy, got obsessed with psychology and sports performance as well, because I was a high level sports person at the same time. So I've had this life of trying to understand the world. And where I'm at now, and I believe my purpose kind of on my third career, is how do I simplify things to make the world easier for everybody to have a better experience? And I really like the campsite rule, George. I want to leave every person, situation, and system better than I found it. And I genuinely believe that's my purpose, and that's why I love doing the work that I do now.
Well, I think that is awesome, and I love that too. Got to leave things better than how you found them. How to simplify life. Well, that's pretty ambitious, or maybe it's not.
I think people make life too complicated. What is life about? I think it's down to six feelings: fear, joy, anger, sadness, interest, and disgust. And anything can be a root of one of those six feelings. And I really like the concept by the what they call conscious leadership group, which is above and below the line. So below the line is our emotive, animalistic response, our reactive response to things. And then how do we want to move from that to a cognitive, executive functioning adult response of choice? And I think that's easier than people realize. And we don't do a good job of teaching that in schools. The fact that we spend so much time thinking about things like maths, and don't get me wrong, I love maths, it's my favorite subject at school with physics. But how many people are going to be using that, especially now that we have so much easily accessible technology? I'd like to see us teaching relationships much more. So I think you mentioned it off camera, that kind of self-regulation, how we understand how we're showing up in the world, the things that trigger us. Some of that can just be natural human being experience. And some of it can be what we went through as childhood being kind of reflected to us. So I help people with both. I help you understand the human experience, and then I help you understand yourself at such a level that you're able to take more control and ownership of your human experience.
Well, I think that is awesome. So, understanding how it is that we're interacting with those six emotions and how
Yeah.
they're impacting us, triggering me for the positive or for the negative, and then once I start to recognize that, what do I do with it?
Yeah. So there's the layer in between that. So the layer in between that is the fight, flight, freeze, and fawn system. So we get a trigger, and our animal part of our brain goes, do I fight? Do I run away? Do I play dead? Or do I placate? So if we extrapolate that out into ancient times, we're walking across a field, we see a lion. Are we going to run away from it? Are we going to try to fight it with the weapons that we have? Are we going to try and hide in a tree? Or are we going to feed it so that it doesn't eat us? And then what's happening now is we get a text from somebody that says we need to talk. That same nervous system is activated, but we're not under the same level of threat. So now, how do we move from that much faster? We don't need to fight the person who sent us a text. We don't need to freeze and hide. We just need to be curious and go, oh, interesting. Somebody's texting me. I wonder what they want to talk about. And we have these old kind of patterns where we think these things are threatening and they're not. So we're approaching the world thinking the world is way more threatening than it actually is. So I really want to give people more choice about, let's be a lot less threatened, let's be a lot calmer. Your system's going to get activated. So this is that below the line response. It's always going to get activated. Don't think that you should be completely unreactive. The trick is how quickly can you move from reactive to conscious thought?
It's a human superpower, is that we get to choose. We get to choose how
Yeah.
to respond and handle. But if I don't know that I have this superpower, then I'm just sort of at the whim of my emotions.
Yeah, I love that. And that's what I often see when I first start working with people. They just don't have the language about it. So they don't have the language about the fight, flight, freeze, and fawn system. They don't have language around emotions, especially men. We teach men not to have that language. If you look at little kids, toddlers have the same range of emotions, male and female. They're going to have the same amount of emotions and the same range of them. And then we start telling little boys, especially, don't have feelings. Don't be weak. Don't be a pussy. Man up. All the kind of stuff that we say to little boys. And then we do the same with women. It's like you can have some feelings, but not other feelings. Don't be angry. Don't be assertive. So we tell these little kids that this, you know, correct response, which is a feeling, which is what our system is designed to do. And I teach people feelings are just data. There's no bad feelings, there's no good feelings. You might have a negative response related to a feeling, like somebody dies and you feel sadness. Someone dying is a negative response or a negative action. But sadness itself is not negative. Sadness is actually good. And it's telling you that person was important. It's telling you you cared about that person. So it's how do you kind of look at those feelings, observe them, and as you said, this superpower that humans have is right now I get choice. What's that feeling telling me? How would I like to choose to be instead of just staying in this reactive state?
So this sounds like an example of sounds easy does hard, right? Because, oh, that's easy. I just get to choose.
Yeah.
But if I've been doing and responding the same way for however many years I've been on Earth and now arriving at this new information, it takes some time. How do we do that work?
Yeah, that's a great question, George, and a great observation. And that's the thing, people start working with coaches like me and they think, oh, I'll do a couple of sessions with you and everything's going to be changed. It's like, well, you've been behaving this way for 30, 40, 50 years. And now we need to undo that. And it's literally unwiring the way that your brain has learned to work. This is why psychedelics are so powerful because they create a large amount of neuroplasticity. So it's easier to change that wiring. That's why people feel that doing a psychedelic trip can feel like 10 years of therapy in one go. It just takes time and it takes relearning. And the first part of that I tell people to do is just to note what is happening. How do I feel at any one moment in time? What is that automatic nervous response? Do I typically want to fight? Do I typically want to run away? And just getting used to it and go, oh, this is what I typically do. And then once you start noting that, then you start to create the room for, okay, how would I like to be different instead? And then you start playing with that and practicing. Well, let's choose to be this instead of this right now.
Is that hard for people because we want to fall back on what's comfortable? So there's so many layers to why I'm not able to do this or why it takes me longer. I'm afraid of the success that I'll have. I'm afraid of the changing and what people will think of. There's probably a million things.
Yeah. Yes, it is. And that's why my engagements are typically pretty long. Most of my clients are startup or scale-up companies, and I work with multiple people in the organization, usually the leadership team and key players. I coach them individually on how to be the best version of themselves, especially centered around their leadership. We do not do enough teaching of leadership in society. We give people a promotion and just expect them to be a leader, and it's a really skilled and responsible job. And then I teach these people how to have relationships with each other that are much more effective, how to communicate, give feedback, be honest, be empathetic, and be vulnerable with each other because that creates safety and honesty. And it takes time. And it's one of those things you start doing this work and you think, oh, it's pretty simple, complex, pretty simple concepts. And then you start doing it and you're like, okay, yeah, there's years of baggage here. There's years of the way that my parents spoke to me that have created these behavioral patterns in my head that need to be unraveled, exposed, and then rewritten.
And you're an ambitious guy. So you say, not only am I going to help you as an individual, I'm going to help the whole organization do this together.
Too smart for my own good sometimes, George. I like the complexity of all of these moving parts. It like really lights my brain up of how do we help an organization? And my desire in life is to be as impactful as possible. I would be a terrible politician, especially in an American setup. I'm not cheesy enough. I couldn't take the bribes that needed to be taken. I'm too honest and direct. So how can I be impactful? Well, I can work with very smart people that are doing really interesting things that can impact humanity. And I can help them be better versions of themselves so that they can be more successful, so they can be more impactful. So that's where I've kind of put in my zone of genius to help other people be the best versions of themselves. And at the same time, I run men's groups, and I really believe in the ripple effect of if we help men be better versions of themselves, that ripples out. Their sons, daughters become better versions of themselves. Their relationships are better. Their friendships are better. And it just ripples out. And that's how I want to affect society.
Two questions. Assuming for this to be successful, you have to have people opting into it. They have to want to
Yeah.
go through this. And then once you have, so I'm curious if you're working with a startup and there's somebody within the organization, within the leadership team, maybe even that's not interested, how do you handle that? And then you talk about men's groups. I can see where more people would actually be a benefit to this because then you can look around and you'd see, oh, there's George. He's similar to me. I can see myself in Lee, and they're doing this work. And so it's more of a
Yeah.
pull.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's a great question. And I like the framing of it. So, yeah, typically what happens when I work with an organization is I have to create a space where people feel safe enough to show themselves to me without judgment. And it just so happens I've always been really good at that. I worked in sales when I was young. That was my first serious career in real estate. And I always seem to be able to create safety because I'm very honest and open myself, and I will share of me and I'll share my struggles so that people know I'm not this perfect person sitting in front of them judging them. So that's how we create the safety. And yeah, look, there's some people, there's some people in the world that are sociopaths and psychopaths and don't have empathy or very limited empathy or don't want to grow. And what I typically do in those is I don't coach those people. So I might say to an organization, well, maybe it's not best for me to coach this person, but what I do is I coach the other people around them on how best to deal with them. So how to put up boundaries, how to speak to them so that their impact can be heard. And that's actually how you moderate the behavior of people like that, is to put a container around them of other people that can deal with them more effectively. And I often do that. And you're right, you've got to come to this work with some honesty, with some ability to have some reflection and go, okay, how am I showing up now? Where do I want to get to? And together we will coach that gap so that you can get to where you want to get to. What I do find though is that most successful people have that attitude, both in sports and now in the leadership world. People are driven and want to be better versions of themselves. And I'm quite particular about who I work with. I will only work with companies that are doing some kind of social or impactful work that's good, better for human beings.
Which makes a ton of sense.
Yeah.
It's,
And I didn't answer your second question, so I'll come back to that, which is the men's groups. And I think you're 100% right that what happens there is men will see other men in these groups and say, "You've changed. What's happened for you? What, you just seem calmer and more able to deal with things." And they'll say, "Oh, I'm in a group and I get to talk to other men and I get to share my stuff, and it changed the way that I look at the world." And I think that's a really powerful way to draw men in, is when other men experience people changing and go, "I want some of that too," or "I'm lonely. What's this doing for you? You found some people to speak to. You found some brothers that you can sit with and have an experience."
and most people want that, even if they say that they don't.
It's, I kind of trick guys a little bit, so I'm sorry, guys, if you're listening. We talk about mental performance, we talk about being better versions of themselves, and then they show up, and I'm like, okay, why are you here? And let's talk about feelings. But I get away with that because of my background, high level sport. I'm a man's man, I'm a bloke. They know that I'm not coming at this in some kind of woo-woo way. I'm coming from a psychology background of this is how the human brain works. Do you want to take advantage of it to have a better experience in the world? And I can share the research with them and I can demonstrate to them how having this understanding of their brain will change their relationships. And it's amazing how quickly people go, oh, I get it now. Now I understand. So that stuff that's going on, I can't really name. There's names for that. Now I can name it. I can share it with you. I can share it with my partner. Now that somebody can understand me, and now I have language. So a lot of it for men is especially is helping them create language so that they can communicate and be heard. A lot of men come to my men's groups frustrated. They know their things aren't working like they want them to, their relationships, their work, their life, their own kind of life plan, but they don't have the language necessary to communicate it. We do a lot of work on the language to help them communicate what they need.
Which makes a ton of sense. And I can certainly, I guess the term is identify or reflect that I've gone through those iterations
Yeah.
also and feeling like you just want something more, there's something more for you. You just don't know how to access it or how to start that process or start the
Yeah.
work. So all that makes sense. And then from there, it's, I read about how only 3% of Americans have written down their goals, and that's probably true across the world. And we all know how important goal setting is, yet none of us do it. So when you're asking or talking about want to help people find the best possible version of themselves or identify what that is that a lot easier than maybe we think, or is it way harder?
Yeah, again, we just don't teach this stuff. So an exercise I love to use, and I got it from a woman called Susan Jeffers, who wrote a book called Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway, which somebody gave to me when I was pretty young. And I read the title of it as a young British man. I was like, I'm not afraid. Why would I read this book? And my friend talked me into reading it. It took about 6 months. And once I did, I was like, oh, this is just a map for how to live. And the exercise is a 9 box exercise. So what you do is you draw a 3 by 3 grid, create 9 boxes, and in each box you put an area of your life. So it might be career, friendships, romantic relationship, hobbies, sports, whatever it is, and it's your life. So you create your own 9 boxes, and then you put where you are now. So where am I now with that box in my life? And then where would I like to get to? And this is part of that goal setting thing. And then I get guys to revisit their 9 boxes every 3 months. And it changes quite a bit. During COVID, I retired from being a competitive track sprint cyclist. I broke my ankle. I've got an issue with it. And one of the things that really flares it up is unfortunately track sprint cycling. However, it's fortuitous because it was the right time for me to retire. I'd done it for 35 years. It's like, okay, time for some new stuff. And in that process, I'm looking at my 9 box, and what was a track cycling box became actually a competition box. I like competition. Track cycling for me was a vehicle for competition. So now that box has go-kart racing and pickleball in it. And they're now my vehicles to have competition both with myself and with other people. So having this thing to keep coming back to and understanding yourself and going, what is it I want? What is it I need from this? And you can use this to all these different areas of your life. And another advantage of this model is if an area of your life is not going well, say you've just lost your job or you've just split up with a romantic partner, you can look and go, well, I've got 8 other boxes that are full. My life is not useless. I have a full life. It's just one box that's unfull at the moment.
I love that. That's a great exercise. I think just intellectually or saying stuff, but then seeing it visually
Yeah.
certainly helps. And then, of course, revisiting it so we don't just do it once and throw it in the drawer and think that we're done.
If only life was that easy, George.
All done.
I
It's
got
like
I had
digging a
one
hole,
therapy
planting a
session.
seed.
I'm fixed.
Oh, all better, all better. How did you know your dad was a so narcissist, sociopath?
I mean, I didn't know it at the time. I just knew that he was not a normal father. So he didn't do the stuff with me that normal dads do. We didn't go across the park and kick a ball or that kind of stuff. His life was very about him, and I was an extension of him. So he would say to people, look at my son, look how good he is at sport. But he never said that to me. It was to use me as an extension. And he literally said, look how good my sperm is because of the son I've produced. Like actually said those words. And, as I got older and started therapy, the therapist said to me, look, a lot of this is going to be about your relationship with your father. And I said, no, I haven't cared about that guy since I was 14 years old. And, 6 months into therapy, I'm like, hey, James, I think a lot of this might be about my relationship with my father. So, I managed to unpack it and understand it. I just knew when I was young, I didn't want to be like him because I found his behavior abhorrent, embarrassing, disgusting. It was all about chasing women. So yeah, and then I put language to that when I got older, like my dyslexia and my autism. I knew I was different as a kid. I just didn't know how until much later when I was diagnosed with these things. I'm like, so my brain works a bit different. That explains so much.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Thank you. And for those people who are listening, who are wondering or thinking, well, maybe this is for me, maybe it's not. How do I know that this kind of work will help me? What do you say to them?
I get it. And any kind of change is difficult and scary. Human beings don't like change. For some reason, we're programmed to be more afraid of change than see the possibility of change. And one of the things that I see in high performers is they manage to flip the switch on that and they're looking for possibilities. They're looking for how can things be better? How can things be different? Rather than, oh my God, I don't want to do that because what if it's worse? And actually, most things are better when we do them rather than worse. We just have that, safety setting is just incorrectly set because the world used to be a very dangerous place and our psychology hasn't caught up to basically how safe the world is now and also how much possibility we have as human beings now. There's so much choice and option for us that it gets overwhelming and therefore we don't take steps. And I encourage people, just try stuff. Try stuff and see what happens. The worst thing is you can go, I don't like that. Let's do something else instead.
I love it. Well, Lee, thank you so much for coming on. Where can people learn more about you? How can they engage with you?
To keep with a simple theme, George, leepovey.com, Lee Povey on all the social medias. I'm particularly active on LinkedIn and then Instagram. I have a newsletter. So if you go to my website, I write a newsletter article every week. Every time it's got something that helps you have a better human experience, something about relationships or leadership or how we show up. I'd love to have you on the newsletter. I've got about 10,000 people at the moment. I want to help as many people as possible. So come join that. And then lastly, we have a group on LinkedIn called the Founders Catalyst. This is specifically for founders. Come and join us. It's free. I'm not going to sell you anything. It's just a place to come and talk to other founders and learn more about leadership.
Outstanding. If you enjoyed this as much as I did, show Lee your appreciation. Share today's show with a friend who also appreciates good ideas. Go to leepovey.com. It's LeePovey.com. Check out everything Lee is working on there. Find him on LinkedIn and Instagram under Lee Povey. And I will certainly link all those in the notes of the show. And if you are a founder looking for a little bit of community, find the Founders Catalyst group on LinkedIn. I will certainly link all those in the notes of the show. Thanks again, Lee.
Thank you, George.
Until next time, remember, do your part by doing your best.